I didn't mean to replay that sentence in my head, but the first time she said it, half under her breath, half like she'd already told it 1,000 times, it stuck. Not because I understood it. I didn't. But because of the way her mouth tightened after the words, like she'd handed me a box I wasn't supposed to open. It was late afternoon, the kind of heat that makes the air in the shop taste like burnt metal and dust. I was elbow deep in the engine of a battered sedan when she walked in. Not the kind of customer you expect. Clean lines, pressed blouse, dark hair pinned back neatly. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not in a greasy auto repair shop 2 blocks from the train tracks. She didn't even glance at the cars. She walked straight to the counter, tapped her fingernails once against the surface, then folded her arms, calm, composed, but with a weight in her shoulders that didn't quite match the rest. "Is the manager in?" she asked. I wiped my hands on a rag and told her he'd stepped out. For some reason, instead of waiting, she looked straight at me. "Then maybe you can help." That was the start. Just a simple exchange. But even in the way she spoke, you could feel a story pressed between the words. She needed her husband's car checked, the one I was already hunched over. She said it almost casually, like she was just passing a message. But then she added, quieter, "He won't be the one bringing it in anymore." And that's when the line slipped out. I chose my friends over my husband. He chose freedom over me. I froze for a moment, fingers still against the grease-slicked bolts, pretending to tighten something that didn't need tightening. I wasn't sure if she realized she'd spoken it aloud. I didn't answer. She didn't explain. The silence stretched, filled only by the dull hum of a ceiling fan and the tick of cooling metal. Finally, I asked if she wanted to wait while I finished. She nodded once, too quickly, like she regretted admitting anything at all. So she sat in the corner chair near the vending machine, legs crossed, phone in hand, but not really looking at it. And I worked, pretending I wasn't hyper-aware of her presence. The shop smelled of oil and old coffee, but with her there, the space felt different, like the air was waiting for something. I caught myself glancing over more than once. She didn't notice, or maybe she did, because at one point, her eyes lifted and met mine, and neither of us looked away fast enough. Just half a second too long. Enough for the noise of the shop to drop out, like someone had muted the world. She smiled faintly then, but it wasn't a smile that reached her eyes. It was polite, practiced, like she'd worn it for years. Still, it landed harder than it should have. When I finally finished, I told her the car would run fine now. She thanked me. Simple, direct, but then she added, "You remind me of someone. Not sure who yet." That stayed with me. Not the words themselves, but the tone. Curious, almost unsettled. Like she'd seen a flicker of something she didn't expect. She left with the car, the sound of her heels fading against the concrete. I went back to wiping tools I'd already cleaned, hands moving without purpose. And all I could think about was the pause between us, the glance that lasted too long, the way her voice dipped when she thought no one was listening. That was the spark. Not romance. Not yet. Just something unspoken. Something I knew I'd carry home, even when I tried not to. The next time she came in, it wasn't for her husband's car. It was for her own. A small repair. Nothing major. But she lingered longer this time, hovering near the counter instead of sitting in the corner. I told her it would take an hour, maybe less. She nodded, then pulled out a book from her bag and opened it. But I could see her eyes drifting to the same page over and over, not moving forward. I tried not to stare. I focused on the car, though every time I passed by the counter, I caught the faint smell of her perfume. Something clean, subtle, not the kind that filled a room, but the kind that made you notice when you leaned just a little too close. She looked up once and asked, "Do you ever get tired of this?" Her voice wasn't curious. It was more like she was asking herself out loud. I shrugged. "It's steady. Keeps my hands busy." She smiled, a small curve of her mouth, then looked back down at her book. The smile didn't last long. That's when I noticed her hands. Not in the way you notice someone's rings or nail polish, but in the way they held the book. Firm, a little too still, as though if she didn't grip it tightly, something else might slip out of her. Looks like a good one, I said, nodding at the cover. It's not, she replied quickly, then softened her tone. But it keeps me distracted. The word distracted hung between us. I didn't press. I just went back to the car, tightening bolts I'd already checked twice. When I finished and brought her the paperwork, she was leaning back, head tilted slightly, as if she were somewhere else. Tired. The kind of tired that goes deeper than sleep. You okay? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, caught off guard. Then, just as quickly, she smoothed it over with that practiced composure of hers. Of course, just a long week. But something in the way she said it, too quick, too final, told me she didn't want me to believe her. I handed her the keys, and as our fingers brushed, a quick static spark jumped between us. She pulled back almost immediately, her face unreadable. I pretended not to notice, but the electricity lingered in my hand long after. Thank you, she said, softer this time. Not polite, not rehearsed, just soft. She turned to leave, and for a moment, I thought that was it. But at the door, she paused, looked over her shoulder, and asked, Do you always notice when people are tired? I didn't have an answer ready. By the time I opened my mouth, she was already gone. But the question stayed, circling in my chest like a quiet engine I couldn't turn off. It was raining the night she stopped by again. Not a soft drizzle. Real rain, the kind that hammered the roof of the shop and made the gutters overflow. I was locking up, keys already in hand, when her car pulled in under the overhang, wipers still slashing furiously across the windshield. She stepped out, hair damp at the ends, blouse clinging to her in places the rain had reached. She looked tired again, but also restless, like the storm outside had forced her here against her better judgment. Sorry, she said, standing just inside the door as water dripped from her jacket. I didn't mean to catch you this late. The headlights are flickering. I wasn't sure if I should drive it home. I told her it was fine, I could take a look. And so we were there, just the two of us, shop lights buzzing above while the storm roared outside. As I worked, she stayed close, closer than usual. Not at the counter, not across the room. Right there, leaning lightly against the hood of the car. Her presence pressed against me in ways I didn't have words for. Do you ever feel like you made the wrong choice? She asked suddenly. Her voice was low, meant more for herself than for me. I hesitated, wrench in hand. About what? Anything, she said. Then, softer. Everything. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but I didn't. I just nodded like I understood. Maybe I did. Her phone buzzed on the hood. She glanced at the screen, face tightening. She didn't pick it up, just silenced it with her thumb. For a moment, I saw something raw flicker across her face. Frustration, regret, maybe both. You can answer, I said, though I didn't mean it. She shook her head. No, not tonight. The storm rattled the doors, thunder shaking the walls, and in the quiet that followed, I realized how close we were standing. I could see the faint line where her makeup had smudged under her eyes, the way her breath lifted a strand of damp hair against her cheek. I didn't move. Neither did she. It felt like something was about to happen. Not a kiss, not even a touch, but some kind of crossing over. My chest tightened with the urge to say something I shouldn't, to admit how much space she'd already taken up in my head. But before I could, the phone buzzed again, louder this time. She flinched, snatched it up, and turned away, muttering something about later. Her voice was sharp, then soft, then gone. The call ended as quickly as it started. When she faced me again, her composure was back in place. But her hands trembled just slightly as she tucked the phone into her bag. Thank you for checking this, she said, as though nothing had happened. Her tone was brisk, professional, but her eyes lingered on mine a moment too long. And in that pause, I almost reached out, almost. But I didn't. The shop was quiet that evening. Too quiet. No storm this time. No customers, just the faint hum of the soda machine and the creak of metal as I closed up early. She had come by again. No repair this time. Just a checkup she claimed was routine. We both knew it wasn't about the car. She sat on the counter, ankles crossed, tapping her heel against the metal edge while I packed up my tools. I could feel her eyes on me. Not heavy, not demanding, but constant. Like she was waiting for me to say something I didn't know how to begin. I finally broke the silence. "You're here a lot lately." Her lips pressed into something that was almost a smile, almost a frown. "And you notice." "I notice everything," I admitted before I could stop myself. That pulled her eyes to mine. Dark, searching, unblinking. We just stayed there, caught in a stare that said far more than either of us would risk out loud. My chest tightened, my throat dry. After a long pause, she asked, very softly, "What are we doing?" Her voice cracked halfway through the question, not enough for anyone else to hear, but enough for me to feel it. I set down the wrench in my hand. Slowly, deliberately. "I don't know." She looked away then, down at her hands folded in her lap. The stillness in her body was sharper than words, like she was holding herself together with sheer will. "You remind me that I'm still seen," she whispered, almost too quiet to catch. The air seemed to shift with that confession. I wanted to answer, to give her something back, but all I could do was stand there, my heart pounding too loud in the silence. "I shouldn't be here," she added quickly, shaking her head. "Then why are you?" I asked, my voice rougher than I meant. Her gaze shot back to mine, defiant for a split second, then unbearably vulnerable. "Because when I'm here, I don't feel ruined." The words landed like a punch. Not romantic, not flirtatious, just raw, jagged truth. I didn't move closer. I didn't dare. But in that still shop, in that silence that spoke louder than anything we'd said before, I realized we'd crossed into a place neither of us could pretend was normal anymore. She slid off the counter, straightened her blouse, and lifted her chin like she hadn't just exposed herself. But her final line stayed, fragile and devastating, breaking in her throat as she reached the door. "Don't let me need this." And then she was gone. She didn't come around for almost 2 weeks. Long enough for me to think maybe she'd meant what she said last time, that she couldn't let herself need this. I tried to bury myself in work, but every night when the shop closed and the silence stretched, I caught myself glancing at the door like she might appear. Then, one evening, she did. No pretense this time. No car trouble, no excuse. Just her, standing in the doorway after hours, raincoat draped over her arm. "Sorry," she murmured, though she didn't sound sorry at all. "I shouldn't have come." I didn't answer right away. I just stepped aside and let her in. She perched on the same counter as before, her hands folded tight in her lap. Something was different, though. Her posture, the way her eyes seemed both restless and hollow. "You said once," she began, her voice catching, "that you notice everything." I nodded. "Then maybe you've noticed that I—" She stopped, pressing her lips together, swallowing hard. Instead of finishing, she pulled her phone from her bag, tapped the screen, and held it out. It was a voicemail. She pressed play before I could ask. A man's voice filled the shop, raw, ragged, and full of a grief I didn't recognize. "I don't know why I'm still calling. You made your choice. But God, I can't stop missing you." She stopped the message before it ended, hand trembling just slightly. "My husband," she said flatly. Then, quieter, or ex. I don't even know what to call him anymore. I stared at the floor, unsure what to say. The weight in her voice wasn't just regret. It was the sound of someone carrying a wound that never healed. "You remind me of him," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not in the way you act. It's the way you look at me, like I'm still worth seeing." The words rattled something inside me I didn't know how to contain. I wanted to tell her I wasn't him, that I wasn't anyone's replacement, but the look in her eyes, fragile, searching, almost pleading, made the words dissolve on my tongue. Instead, I just said, "I see you." Simple, honest, nothing more. She inhaled sharply, blinking hard, as though those 3 words cut deeper than anything else I could have offered. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just looked at me in silence, the faintest shake in her shoulders, as if holding herself back from unraveling completely. And then she whispered, almost inaudible, like she was admitting it against her will. That's the part that scares me. The night she returned, it wasn't with hesitation. It was with a heaviness, as if she'd already decided something before she walked through the door. The shop was closed, lights dimmed except for the one above my workbench. She didn't ask if she could come in. She just did, setting her bag on the counter like she belonged there. For a long while, neither of us spoke. I kept polishing a wrench that didn't need polishing, and she sat, watching, her posture composed, but her eyes betraying the storm underneath. Finally, she broke the silence. I can't keep pretending this is nothing. The words didn't rush out. They fell carefully, like she'd rehearsed them. I set the wrench down, my hands suddenly still. Neither can I. She gave a half laugh then, not joyful, more like relief laced with defeat. Do you realize how wrong this is? How much it could ruin? Yes, I said simply. And then, after a pause, but that doesn't change that it's real. Her gaze caught mine, and in that stare, every unspoken moment between us stretched out. The pauses, the glances, the near confessions. All of it led here. She leaned back against the counter, shoulders sagging, no longer holding herself so tightly together. For the first time, she looked less like someone in control and more like someone surrendering to the truth. I don't want saving, she whispered, and I don't want replacing. I just don't want to feel invisible anymore. The rawness in her voice cut through me. I stepped closer, not touching, just standing near enough that the warmth of her presence filled the space between us. I see you. I repeated, the same words as before, but this time slower, weightier. Her eyes closed, and in that fragile moment, she didn't push me away. She didn't argue. She just breathed. When she opened them again, I was right there, and neither of us moved back. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't anything so loud. It was her hand brushing against mine, hesitating, then staying. The smallest point of contact, and yet it felt like the ground shifting beneath us. We stood like that, side by side, hand against hand, the silence heavy but no longer unbearable. For once, silence wasn't emptiness, it was acknowledgement. No declarations, no promises, just presence. At last, she whispered, so soft I almost missed it. Then let's just stay here. For now. And that was it. No grand finale. Just two people leaning into a truth they couldn't ignore any longer, holding onto it quietly, as if the world outside had stopped existing. Looking back, I don't think there was ever one moment where it all changed. It wasn't a kiss or some dramatic confession. It was smaller than that, quieter, her hand against mine, the silence we didn't try to fill. That was the night everything shifted, though no one but us would ever know it. I used to think love was supposed to be clear, sharp-edged, undeniable. Like in the movies, one person says it, the other answers, and the story ties itself neatly into a bow. But with her, it wasn't like that. It was layered, complicated, almost impossible to name. And maybe that's why it mattered more, because it didn't fit into anyone else's rules. She never stopped being older, wiser, more scarred than me. I never stopped being the one who watched too closely, who wanted too much. That imbalance didn't disappear. What changed was that we stopped pretending it wasn't there. She told me once that she didn't want to feel invisible anymore. And maybe that's the part that stayed with me most. How someone so composed, so sharp, could still carry that kind of emptiness. Being with her taught me something I didn't expect. That love isn't always about saving or fixing. Sometimes it's just about standing close enough so the other person feels seen. I don't know where this story ends. Not really. We didn't promise each other forever. We didn't even promise tomorrow. But when I think about that night in the shop, the storm quiet outside, the smell of oil and rain in the air, I remember the way her hand stayed against mine. That was enough. More than enough. And for me, that changed everything. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?